Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building Your Self-Service Journey Map, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by Coveo. My name's Vanessa Lucero, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be sent to you within 24 hours via email. Audio will be delivered via streaming. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode. Your webinar controls, including volume, are found below the presenter headshot window. We encourage your comments and questions. If you think of a question for the presenters at any point, please submit through the Ask a Question box on the bottom left side of the webinar player. We will open it up for a verbal Q&A portion at the end of today's session. Lastly, feel free to enlarge the slides to full screen at any time by selecting the full screen button, which will appear on the bottom right corner of the slide player. I would now like to introduce our presenters today. John Ragsdale, Distinguished Vice President of Service Technology Research for TSIA, and Laurel Portner, Director of Education Services for Coveo. As with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes, so let's jump in and get started. John, over to you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. We had a huge response to this event, and I appreciate all of you taking time to tune in. I know from last year's Global Technology Survey that 81% of our support services members have budget for new or additional self-service capabilities in 2018-2019. So I know that this is a very hot topic. Not only are we touching on self-service, but we're also talking about journey maps and customer experience. So we really have a trifecta here of very hot topics, and I think that's why we had such a great response. So while I know a lot of you are looking at projects to completely overhaul your self-service website or maybe just make a few tweaks to it, but today we're going to talk about how you can approach these plans in a very strategic way and look at how they're impacting the overall customer experience and the customer journey. And I wanted to start with this diagram, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen before. Judy Plotz, who runs our support services research team, created this a couple of years ago, and it's something that she and I use in the workshops that we do with members to talk about a high-level four-step plan to creating a customer experience strategy. And although we're usually talking about an overall customer experience strategy, it also applies specifically to making sure that you're creating a strategy for your self-service, that you're, number one, identifying what is the experience that you want to create for your customers. Hopefully you're involving customers in building this out, but this could be a low effort experience, it could be a highly usable experience, it could be having lots of different options to appeal to different skill levels, etc. So the first step is figuring out what is the experience you want to deliver. And then the second step is what are the capabilities that we need in order to deliver on that vision. Number three is identifying the people and the processes that are going to have to change in order to deliver this. And finally, step four is where I spend most of my time. What is the technology required to build the infrastructure to deliver this strategy? So there are a lot of details in the bullets there. You'll get a copy of these slides afterwards. And I think this is a wonderful slide to use in your next offsite or your next departmental meeting to talk about how do we build out this four-step process and specifically doing it for self-service. So as you start identifying the elements of that experience that you want to deliver, I want to call your attention to this report that I published last year. There's a link at the bottom that all of the members can access. But there are three sort of high-level angles on the experience that I would encourage you to consider: persistence, personalization, and intelligence. And I'm going to drill down into each of those. First off, a persistent customer experience. So today we interact with customers in a lot of different ways. In the old days, it used to be primarily phone, then email. But today we've got chat, we've got social media, we've got online communities, as well as the self-service site. And it's very important that as customers begin adopting this wider array of channels or interaction methods, that we're capturing all of these conversations, all of these touch points into contact records or account records in the customer relationship management or CRM system. And that is important, so every time you touch a customer, you're doing it in being relative to every other interaction that's taken place in the past. And something that we recommend, but we don't see a lot of companies doing, is including activity on the website in that customer record. So if the customer is spending an hour searching your website, looking at information on the website, and then they don't find what they need and they call you, when you first open that contact record, you should see which documents they viewed, what they were searching for before you start that conversation. And that is going to help you shortcut the path to the answer and eliminate you trying to revisit things that the customer has already tried that didn't work. So this concept of persistence means we need to stop looking at all of these interactions channels as silos and begin considering them an ongoing conversation with the customer across channel, across touch points, and even including self-service. The next topic is personalization, and this is really huge today. And our consumer lives, we're becoming so used to having things highly personalized for us. You know, a couple of consumer examples would be Amazon and Netflix that are constantly recommending things to us based on what we purchased or what we viewed in the past, proactively notifying us that things are available that are of interest to us, etc. And we bring these expectations into our work lives. And it's very frustrating for a customer, especially when they're paying a very large maintenance agreement or subscription agreement, when they log on to your website and they see a lot of content that doesn't apply to them. So consider personalized frequently asked questions. I think only 16% of our members are doing this today. And that means filtering the FAQs so the only ones the customer sees are relevant to the products they own, the versions they're on, the geography they're in, whatever you have that helps you filter that so the customer isn't prompted with content that's not appropriate for them. Because if they see an FAQ list and a lot of the content isn't relevant to them, they're just going to ignore that in the future. And FAQ lists have a huge potential for solving customer problems with no additional work required, but all of the content needs to be relevant. Pre-filtering search content, this is another one, and if you're using a best-of-breed intelligent search provider, you can look at contact information, account information, and pre-filter search results to, again, only show content that's relevant to the products they own, the versions they're on, the geography they're in, etc. Filtering options are also important. So if the customer wants to drill down into only a specific kind of problem or whatever, it allows them to only look at the one flavor of content, maybe from a single repository, et cetera, that they're interested in, and that really helps them tailor that experience. And the final thing I'm going to talk more about this in just a minute, but machine learning is increasingly important. I know there's a lot of budget around AI and machine learning today, and this means taking advantage of the underlying analytics in your self-service technologies to make sure that we're prompting customers with information that is most likely to solve their problem, maybe based on similar problems in the past and how those were solved. So we're becoming much more personalized, but also much more intelligent in the way that we tailor that customer service experience. And to continue on that theme of AI, AI has a huge potential to not only improve the customer experience, but the employee experience as well. And this means leveraging machine learning, leveraging analytics to look at what historical patterns that you have, understand how this problem was solved in the past, or what customers similar to this customer's profile, what issues they have experienced and how those were resolved. And you can use this information to shortcut the path to the truth. You can even proactively prompt both customers or employees with relevant information. And a great example of that is when a customer is creating a case or an incident for you online, prompting them with relevant content that may solve that problem, which hopefully they'll click through and not continue creating that case. And we are seeing members that are adopting that one feature have a dramatic improvement in self-service success and deflection. And you can easily measure this by how many people start creating a case, click on some knowledge content, and abandon that case creation. So that's a pretty bulletproof deflection calculation. So search analytics, I've written a lot about this, I talk a lot about this, but analytics such as relevancy analysis, that means when people have searched on this search string in the past, what content did they end up clicking on and moving that up in the search results list, even if the keywords in that content aren't necessarily the same as that search string, but understanding what is relevant for each concept. Content gap analysis. This is identifying what customers are searching for and not finding. And having implemented a lot of knowledge management systems and self-service sites, companies always think they know what customers are going to ask. And I'm sorry to say they're usually quite a bit wrong about that, especially as we're seeing a lot more user profiles and use cases for self-service. They're not just system administrator questions. They're a very broad range of topics customers are looking for. So we need to understand what are they searching for and not finding so we can plug those gaps. And finally, usage analysis. This allows us to track which content is being consumed around certain customer demographics, around certain products, etc. And this is a step toward that personalizing the FAQs and helping, again, more tailor that experience for the customer. So some final thoughts kind of recapping my points today. First of all, I think it's really important that you create a customer experience strategy specific to self-service. And, I would advise you to not only interview customers, but take some time thinking about consumer websites that you may spend a lot of time on. Maybe your cable provider has a great mobile app that you use. I know I do. Maybe your financial service institution has a great mobile app or a web self-service site. So think about things that you're seeing, capabilities you're seeing that you may want to incorporate into your site as well. The next step is inventorying all the available content and make sure it's seamless to access. And please check out my 2018 State of Knowledge Management report I published in October. It outlines 6 steps to dramatically improve self-service success. And this is one of them. The most common problem I find when I'm auditing a company's self-service site is they have a lot of siloed content. You search the knowledge base and it's not showing you a match from the online community. Or if you're searching the community, you're not finding matching content from the learning management system. It's very important that anytime a customer searches on your website, they're finding relevant information from every single repository, including documentation, release notes, etc. etc. If you expect the customer to search multiple times in multiple repositories, it's very unlikely they're going to find that one nugget of information because that's in the one repository they didn't think to search. Another thing is, and this is core knowledge management best practices, but tacit knowledge, this is the knowledge in our heads that we learn through doing our jobs that typically is not documented anywhere. And you've got to have a culture that is constantly encouraging employees to document this tacit knowledge and make it available to other employees as well as customers. And this is all part of your knowledge management publishing process. But constantly learning what new issues are coming up and documenting those, it's very unusual for a problem to only happen once. So when a problem occurs for the first time, document the issue, document the resolution, and make sure that's available for customers. And the final point I wanted to make is I'm finding that many companies aren't tracking any usage of the website to understand consumption and success. And last year in my knowledge management survey, I introduced some clickstream metrics for the first time. And I have some high-level clickstream metrics here. As a starting point, I would recommend that you track average number of page views per session, average session duration, and average number of searches per session. And this is something that you've got to have as a beginning benchmark before you make any changes to the website. And as you redesign the website, introduce new search capabilities, etc., ideally you're going to see that page views go up, page browsing time goes up, they're doing additional searches, and that shows that customers are more engaged with your website. So have these numbers as a starting point and then track them as you move forward after any changes to the website. And in addition to calculating success and deflection, I think that these clickstream metrics are very important to include in your metrics program. So I hope that gave you some thoughts on designing a customer experience strategy for self-service and understanding the journey that customers are going to go on as they explore your self-service options. And for now, I would like to turn things over to our guest speaker today. Lauren Portner is the Director of Education Services for Coveo. Laurel, take it away.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Those are some great thoughts and on creating a relevant customer experience that I want to talk about today. And we're going to dive into that in a little bit more detail. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to build a self-service journey map that for the 81% that have some budget, I think that this is going to help your organization shape the vision for a personalized and unified self-service experience across all your channels, and help develop a plan for the changes, the process, and some of the investments that you need in order to deliver those relevant experiences at scale. So as a good educator, I like to start with the why. So why are support organizations heavily investing in their self-service channels? And let's perhaps take a second look at, what their current strategy might be. So first of all, as John said, customers are increasingly expecting more relevance. Companies like Amazon and Netflix are setting and raising that bar for personalized experiences. And it doesn't lower when those same customers are interacting with your company. And secondly, as support leaders, you need a unified view of the self-service journey in order to be able to deliver on those expectations. Like John said, working in silos of those different channels is just not going to get you where you need to be. So even though the relevant experiences are now more the standard for the B2C experience and they're driving up those expectations for B2B, your customers know that your support site's not Netflix. So what are they reasonably expecting from you in terms of relevance? And to put it simply, they expect you to know them, really simply. And I mean, how frustrating is it when you're asked a bunch of questions from a partner, a business partner that you already have a relationship with. So, and then they also want you to put to good use that information in an appropriate and secure way. So you need to figure out how to deliver a relevant, personalized support experience to your customers based on some different information. Like if they're authenticated, what is the information they have given to you about them as an individual? And as John said, maybe their region that they're from, what language do they speak, customer profile, products that they own, and how they use them, what kind of training they may have taken already, or support cases that they have opened in the past. And if they are going to other channels, what are they doing there? So this is the point that's important. So let's elaborate on this on the next slide. So I think that we'd all agree that these expectations are pretty reasonable, but the reality is that there's a dichotomy between what customers perceive of your self-service journey and the way most support organizations plan for and manage these experiences. So the different touch points or channels that your customers are interacting with to get support, to self-serve, to find answers they're looking for, are usually siloed. Often, different teams are responsible for different online digital properties, and they're typically using different systems, maybe have different data or different content, and have a different look and feel. So we end up in this situation where there's different touch points of the journey that will deliver different disjointed experiences. So how many of you have heard, oh, that site's owned by another team. I'll need to send your feedback over to them. And this is where that disconnect is. So to your customers, you are one brand. They don't know, nor do they care if your digital properties are owned by different parts of your organization. So they perceive their self-service journey as one continuous experience, and then they expect it to feel as such. So that's why we suggest that support leaders and really everyone involved in the customer experience build a self-service journey map. To force yourself to perceive the experiences you deliver the same way your customers do, and think about and plan for those implications throughout the support strategy. I happened to recently participate in a customer journey map myself, and I was joined by representatives from support, services, development, operations, leaders that were all collaborating to help build the map. Now, in a perfect world, a self-service journey map would be fairly easy to iron out. All your customers would have a similar profile. They would begin their journey with you at a given channel, like your website. They would purchase your product, and then they would use your product, and then maybe visit your customer community if they run into an issue, or worst case scenario, contact your call center if they can't find the information on the community. And in fact, my recent experience, this was one of the hardest parts of the mapping process, the beginning. So we all know that the perfect world doesn't exist, so the self-service journey is not a linear path. And every customer is going to choose their own path to find answers. They're going to interact with your channels and touch points all along the journey at different points. So no matter how hard you try to predict and map out those different paths, it's really nearly impossible to map them all out and the different scenarios to tailor the experience for each of them, and especially manually. So you need a self-service strategy that will adapt to all of the interactions or all the different profiles of customers for all your products and their potential related cases in real time at scale. So let's figure out how we can do that. So the goal is to build an intelligent, relevant, scalable self-service journey map that will help you visualize all your channels, how they should be leveraged as part of the journey, and how the interactions happening on one channel should influence the experience delivered on the others. So in order to build such a map, you need to lay out these three fundamental pillars. And the first one, you need to think about your methodology to create and manage content. Also, have a plan for how and where that content should be used. So the first thing we suggest is listing all the content sources, the different types of data that are relevant to your support journey and that your customers should be able to access. So this can be from maybe a wide range of dynamic, more informal content like community discussions, knowledge articles, case information, to more formal static content like training videos, product documentation, FAQs, and so forth. Next, let's think about the types of content and on which channel they should be delivered or made accessible. Your customers shouldn't have to go to multiple places, as John was talking about, for the information that they're looking for. So think about how you can transform each of these touch points into a one-stop shop for relevant and appropriate types of content. For example, you may find that it makes sense for your technical documentation to be searchable and accessible from your community site, or training videos should be accessible from your training portal or support portal. And then map out the content that would help your customers self-serve on each of your digital properties. And then think about how that interaction and the different channels should influence each other. So not all interactions may be relevant or should inform the experience of others, but what are those relationships that you can't miss? For example, if your customer is coming to your support site from an in-app help section of your product, you want to tailor those results that your customer is going to see on your support site for the product that they were just using. Or if your customer first went to your corporate site and browsed some pages related to a specific product, you probably want to tailor that content when they get to your support site on their next visit. So you want to remember some of that. Wouldn't it be nice to see what your customers are searching on if they ended up submitting a support case so that you can head off some questions ahead of time? And finally, identifying the signals that you should be listening for on each of those channels. What are the metrics and KPIs that matter that you need to monitor? We're going to talk about how to look at them in a holistic way in order to help you make more informed business decisions and create a virtuous cycle of continuous improvement for your entire support strategy. So you need to look at these three pillars together and the people, process, and technology that's needed to support each of them in order to build a relevant, scalable, and always improving self-service strategy. So let's dive into each of these. First one is your content strategy. And we've got a polling question to start off. Does your support organization have a methodology in place to create and update and publish content? And here are some of the options, more popular options. All right, so we're starting to get some votes in here. A lot of KCS. A few more seconds here to calculate. All right, so we've got quite a few people practicing KCS, about 45%, and also another good percentage of traditional KM, knowledge management practices, some a little bit of ITIL, and some that don't have a methodology. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about a content strategy, and this might help you with some decisions about maybe making a change or just validating some of the things that you're already doing. So this slide is a slide that I like to use a lot from the Consortium for Service Innovation, the founders of Knowledge Centered Service, or KCS. And it really helps visualize the importance of having a strategy in place and also getting the most up-to-date content available for your self-service channel. Support organizations are often focused on the more expensive assisted interactions on the left, on the assisted service. But when you take time to look at the whole demand and usage, you'll see that demand for self-service is huge. And customers make decisions every day on which channel to use based on their perceptions in the amount of effort that it's going to take them. Think about your own experience and how you decide and when to use them. So, for example, I had a recent problem with some contacts on my mobile phone, and I went to the vendor website and I did a self-service search, and I couldn't find the answer. So then I went to a community site, and again, I'm doing Google searches and finding some of these. So I'm going to all of these different sites, from a search engine, but I still couldn't get it resolved. And then I needed to make a decision. Is it worth me spending the extra time contacting the assisted service group to get an answer? A lot of times the answer for me is no. But think about the opportunity that the phone vendor has lost with me, right? And are you measuring all three of these interactions? So let's think about the demand. The Consortium for Service Innovation has been around for over 25 years, and its members have invested over $50 million in knowledge-centered service practices. And the majority of its members have found, they've done these calculations, that the total demand for service is a multiplier based on the assisted demand. And you can see here 10 times, up to 10 times the volume that you get in your assisted channel is in self-service. And in communities, it can be up to 30 or actually even more. And this is why also the clouds overlap. So the consortium members found that a lot of people are focused on case deflection, and they're deflecting the assisted incidents to self-service. But it's actually a much smaller portion of the total demand. So think back to my story. I'm probably not going to call the assisted group about my problem because it's not worth my time and effort. And so my problem that we also call an exception, and the consortium's research shows there's 10 times the number of those exceptions compared to what's coming into your assisted channel. So some will deflect, but a lot of them are going to remain in that self-service or community cloud. So in this example, if we have, let's say, 10,000 cases in a month, your self-service demand is 100,000. I'll give you a second to calculate that for your organization. And again, in my story, if I didn't find the answer, I was okay. I was okay for leaving that for now. But think about the lost opportunity that many organizations are completely unaware of. If you're not measuring this, you may not be focusing on some of these opportunities. Now ask yourself, are you considering that amount of demand when you think about the content you're creating? And who is going to do the work of all of those exceptions that you may not even know about? So keep listening, and I will tell you, because there's a proven way, and I know a good portion of the audience is aware of this through knowledge-centered service. So to meet the demand for that self-service that we were just talking about, I want to talk about the KCS principles. And as the Consortium for Service Innovation has been quoted to say, content is king. And it's what feeds the self-service experience, which is why having a strategy to create, update, and reuse content just in time is so important. And when you lack a knowledge management methodology, you will find challenges with building a solid customer self-service journey map. At Coveo, we strongly believe in the KCS methodology, and I myself am a certified KCS trainer. So how many of you have customers or support people that say something like this? If they would just use the right keywords or our terminology, they'd be able to find the content we have available. Or I can't tell you how many times I get a case from a customer and all I have to do is point them to the correct knowledge article or online help page. Sound familiar? Why do you think that is? Well, the answer is context. So you need to capture the context of how someone is searching or describing the problem in order for them to find it. The best time to do this is when you're interacting with them, and that's the first principle. Create content as a byproduct of solving issues. How many of you would remember the details of a conversation earlier in the day or week if you didn't capture them at the moment of interaction? John talked about that tacit knowledge, bringing that out. What about do you have a process that audits all of your knowledge articles on a regular basis? Or maybe an internal process to review every piece of content before it can be published? Think about how long that takes, how much time, how much effort. With KCS, the content evolves with reuse based on demand. That's the second one. If someone uses it, they improve it. If they don't, then you're not wasting time on an exhaustive review process. So go back to my scenario for support people working cases just to find the right piece of content for a requester. What if they captured the context right at that moment of interaction? Think about how much content could be created for all of those interactions and how much faster the requesters could find it if it was in their context. All right, and so that's that develop a knowledge base of collective experience. You have a lot more content providers to satisfy that enormous demand that we were just talking about, right? And then finally have a vision that everyone's bought into that rewards sharing knowledge. Rather than reward people for what they know, reward and recognize them for how much they share and teach. And this is a strategy that's been proven over and over and over, and again, $50 million put into that. All right, so once you've got a content strategy in place, you need to make the content accessible where your customers need it, map out all your types and sources, and figure out which channels that they should be able to access. So leverage unified search to index all of your content and then make it accessible wherever your customers need it. Mobile apps, community, training sites, product sites. So now let's talk about personalization and relevance. So the Amazon experience, how do we get something closer to that? How do we make it easily accessible to customers and tailor those experiences to go along with the content? So there's three ingredients that need to leverage. We talked about content, and you need to leverage and unify all of that for your customers. We talked about that. Next, you need to consider the person's context. So it's a little different than what we were talking about, but it's also about who are they? Where are they coming from? What did they do in the past that's going to help us get them to where they need to go? And what's their intent? We need to gather and listen to the different signals to understand what they're trying to do. Is it an employee or a customer? Are they a developer? Do they speak a different language? Then, in order to make sense of all of this information, drive and deliver personalization in a scalable way. And the way we do that is through AI and machine learning. There's just so much data, there's no way that you're going to be able to do this manually. So search is a great opportunity to learn from your customers. They speak to you through searching. We talked about that context and what they're searching for, what are their words. And if they're searching in a siloed environment, just like one of these different pillars, it's going to have limited value. So we need to use AI to the fullest extent, and it needs to feed off the information from multiple channels. So talking about going and interchanging from those different channels and following your customer, your requester, along that journey. And there's a lot you can learn along the way. Then, using AI, you can expand it to all of your customers. So our philosophy and approach to relevance starts with search, and it tends to be an undermined element of the digital experience, and that's why we have it front and center on the page here. But it's how your customers are telling you what are they looking for, and the issues that they are experiencing, the products and services that they would like, and what's maybe not easy to understand about your products. Not only are they giving you that information, they expect you to pick up on it and make their experience relevant on every channel at all of these different touch points. Okay, so what are some of these signals, these clues that they're giving you from the search and other browsing behavior that machine learning can learn from? And what is it learning? So these are some of those examples. So search, again, search queries, the actual terms they're using. Which ones did they use that didn't give you any results? That's huge. Why did they not get any results? So think back to what I was saying. Did they just use the wrong keyword? Or do you really not have content on that? So trying to narrow some of that down. Did they use facets to filter out the results because they like the Amazon and experience of doing that first and then filtering down to some of the content? Or maybe they're not using that, and maybe there's some changes to the facets that you should be making. Also, as you start to listen to the signals and feed that information to other channels, it's going to inform and influence that journey. And you're going to start to deliver a more personalized and relevant experience to your customer by using that. And then the third pillar, so metrics and KPIs. So we talked about the funnel and the cloud model, and we talked about measuring the total demand for support. This also applies to how you look at metrics. Measuring support outcomes in a holistic way. You don't want to look at just one or two of these metrics. You need to look at all of them plus all the channels together. A common mistake is looking just at case volume. So if you have just been measuring case volume and all of a sudden you've got self-service visits, that's going to give you a lot more insight into demand and what your customers are doing. You need to have that holistic view to truly understand your support metrics. You might misinterpret the signals if you're only looking at a couple of different measurements. How can measuring lead to improvements in your support strategy and what to measure? Let's take a look further at some of that. So here's some examples of how one informs the other, or by not looking at one may limit some of your decisions, especially business decisions that you might be making. when you look at an increase in average handle time, let's say, you could be concerned. However, if you're looking at your measures in a unified way, you may see that the quick to resolve cases are being pushed to your self-service channel. That's leaving the higher percentage of more complex cases in your assisted channel that's going, to your contact center. So a higher average handle time may make sense. That might actually be a good thing. Same goes for decrease in support portal engagement. So if you're looking at in-app help adoption and you're providing that balanced scorecard view, maybe because they're going to in-app help, they're not going to the support portal as much. Or case deflection. Maybe case deflection is decreasing. That might be concerning. But if your rate of self-service success increases, so they're not even going to the case creation page, I'd say that's a good thing, right? They're not actually going straight to go create a case. They're saying, oh, I'm finding success by searching the self-service site, so I'm going to go there first. Okay, so let's get in. These are just some of the metrics and that will help inform your business decisions. And let's go into an example here of a journey map for one of our customers, Palo Alto Networks. So here's an example of that journey map. So here, websites, by leveraging unified content and secure index across their repositories, they increased engagement by 400%. Contact center, they were rolling out KCS to 300 of their contact center engineers, and that interface provides faster resolutions and improved relevance. So lots of different examples there. So how to move forward? So first, you need to align on a vision and the KPIs that you want for your customer experience across the business. So make sure, we talked about getting people cross-functional departments to map out the vision and get alignment on what that success looks like. Establish some benchmarks for your current state and those customer touch points. What does the customer journey look like today? Measure that success and then identify some of the metrics that matter. Inject relevance into and transform a first touch point of your customer journey. So use AI-powered search and inject relevance and transform a first channel of your customer journey. So start in one place and then make that transformation successful, and then closely monitor how that is impacting your business. Share that success and help build a roadmap on how you can transform the additional touch points and unify your relevance across the journey. All the touch points need to feed into each other, and look at those metrics across all the different departments. So I hope that you found that insightful, and if you're interested in getting started, I've got some helpful programs and assets that you can look at. I host a monthly KCS roundtable discussion. If you want to learn more about knowledge management and content strategies, you can certainly join us, and our next session will take place on March 14th. We have an event taking place in San Francisco at the end of May, and I'll be giving training on KCS and analytics and personalization. If you're a Coveo customer, you can reach out to your customer success manager or just fill out a form on the website. If you're not, you can still contact us, and we can discuss whether this is a good conference for you and your team. And we also have a blueprint to help you with building your self-service journey. If you'd like to get a copy for yourself and your team, please send a quick email to info@coveo.com, and we can provide that to you. And that is all I have. do we have any questions?
Well, Laurel, I'm going to jump in. Thank you very much, as well as John, for presenting a great webinar today. We are coming to a conclusion to today's live webinar event. Don't worry, if you submitted a question, we will follow up with you later today. Now, just a couple of quick reminders before we sign off. There will be an exit survey at the end of today's live webinar. Please take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and your experience by filling out the brief survey. A link to the recorded version of today's webinar will be sent out within the next 24 hours. I'd now like to take this time to thank our presenters, John and Laurel, for delivering an outstanding session, and to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's live webinar, Building Your Self-Service Journey Map, brought to you by Technology Services Industry Association and sponsored by Coveo. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.